Things end. Things end. I'm actually at that stage in life, which is somewhat sobering, where I realize that many more things have ended for me than will likely begin for me in the future. Childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, starting out, perhaps school, certainly a flat belly, and a full head of hair. Things end and won't be coming back. And it seems to me that there's two ways of responding to the fact that things end. One is to obsess about it, to think constantly about things ending. There's actually someone in my life who has been so focused on her imminent demise for as long as I can remember that she's really wasted a lot of years of perhaps a much more fulfilling life. I think some of us know people like that, right? They're so obsessed about how it's going to end, they can't enjoy what is. On the other hand, I think the other way of responding is to ignore it. We live in a culture that seems to think ending is optional. People don't die anymore, they pass, right? And we have entire industries that are there to sort of help us or to believe that somehow things don't have to end. You can stay young. You can be like this forever. Apparently, I could have a full head of hair, but it wouldn't bring me back to when I did. I would still be who I am. So things end, and how do we respond? We can obsess on it, or we can ignore it. Today's gospel passage is actually the first of a few that we're going to hear about ending, that things will end. It begins with Jesus sort of mentioning the fact that the stones of the temple are going to all fall to the ground. And this sort of intrigues the disciples because they see this as being something about the end of time when that's going to happen. That must mean something. So they ask Jesus, when will this happen? When will it happen? When are things going to end? And Jesus, well, instead of answering the question, he just basically described to them what the present reality was. It was alarming, but that's the world that they lived in, an alarming world. But then at the end, when he talks about just the beginning of the birth pangs, he's suggesting that yes, but there is an ending. So there's an invitation on Jesus' part. It's the present you need to be considering, but things will end. And the disciples are kind of desperate in a way for things to end. They have this idea of how Jesus' ministry is supposed to end, with him, sort of taking charge and getting rid of the Romans and all the rest. So that to them too would be some kind of big ending that they were hoping for. But instead, Jesus is saying, just live now, be in the present, be in the present aware that things will and do end. Well, we fast forward 2,000 years, and where are we with this things ending? Well, first of all, our world looks an awful lot like that world, right? I mean, if you've read it, earthquakes and famines and things coming along that would have us worship them instead of Jesus. And it's an alarming world out there, my friends. There's no doubt about it. And so the question is, in the face of that, then, how do we respond? How do we live? Well, again, the temptation would be to simply obsess about ending. A few parishes back, I had a parishioner who was obsessing about the end of the world. He would make an appointment with me, usually about twice a year, and he would come in with books and newspapers and notes that he had made, and he would, try to convince me how all of this was suggesting that the world was about to end very soon. And I always felt like a disappointment to him because I didn't really capture the urgency myself, But that was becoming, in a way, his discipleship, his way of being a Christian was trying to guess when Jesus was going to come back. And we know every few years that happens, right? The world is going to end. And to obsess on that is not the right approach. But also, to ignore it. To ignore the fact that things end is not healthy as well. I'm compelled by that passage there. These large stones. Look at these large stones. Look at this large building. When those people, the Jews of that time, looked at that temple, that was something that was going to stand forever. It was a symbol of permanence. And that's all look at these stones, these large stones. And it seems to me that for many of us, we have large stones that scatter the landscapes of our lives. The things that we think will stand forever. The things that we think will never change. And they can become the object of our affection, the object of our obsession even. But is that healthy? I think not. And I think it's probably healthy for us as individuals and as a congregation, for instance, to take an inventory of these large stones in our life and really imagine, are they permanent? Are they always there? These patterns and habits and behaviors that even when they prove to be not helpful at all, we continue with them. Large stones. Churches that ask the question, well, what did we do last year? Large stones. Or we've always done it that way. Large stones. But things end, my friends. Things end. So what is Jesus inviting us into? I think fully being in the present with an awareness that things end. Being fully present with an awareness that things end. This is a good way to live, isn't it? And I think we would live differently if we lived that way every day. You know, you sometimes hear people joke and they'll say, well, on their deathbed, nobody says, I wish I'd worked more. And yet, you wouldn't know that by some people's lives, right? We need to live our lives in the present as if things end. And that means focusing on what really matters. For us personally, that's often just other people. But for us as Christians, that is our discipleship. That's what the writer of the Hebrews was talking about at the end of that passage. We have a way that we need to live in the present, aware that things will end, by being faithful, by engaging in God's mission in the world today and now. Loving one another, holding one another up, welcoming the stranger, feeding the hungry, caring for the last, the least, and the lost, being faithful, living in the present, but aware that things do and will end. What does that look like for us as a congregation? You see, I think healthy congregations, healthy parishes, are actually aware that things end. And they organize their life accordingly. We know that the parishes around us, churches have closed, right? I have a hunch that in a sense those churches closed because they saw themselves as one of those large stones that was never, ever going to fall. How does one stay alive? By knowing that it could end. We're 175 years in St. George's. The next 175 years aren't guaranteed. How do we live in the present if things end? It seems to me there's a couple of things we can do. One is what some people have called planned abandonment. If something's not working anymore, you know, when the results don't match the resources. That's a good exercise to engage in annually. You know, what do we do? You know, if we knowing what we know now, would we start this? But the other thing is innovation. What can we do that's new? Because if we don't innovate, this could end. I think that's something that we as individuals can do on a regular basis as well. But here's the good news, my friends. Here's the good news. There is one large stone, the cornerstone of our faith, Jesus Christ. That is absolutely permanent. One large stone that will never fall, will never fail. The same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus Christ, his faithfulness, and our faithfulness in following him in his faithfulness is our permanence. Jesus Christ, our cornerstone, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.